Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be covering a standard best of one weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. We will resume kind of the regular schedule of other formats, including best of three, following week. Part of the reason being Concept Arcere is coming to Arena on tomorrow, depending when you're watching this Tuesday, and it's going to be impacting the historic format, the explorer format, and the new timeless format, with timeless coming out tomorrow. Put it through a bunch of content, putting through some deck lists as well. I'll give you some ideas there. So my focus is a little bit more timeless, hopefully, for this week, and then we'll kind of reconvene the following week with the regular scheduled meta breakdowns. So we'll kind of go from there. Sorry for not getting this out on Sunday. It was feeling kind of crappy yesterday with the medical issues, so back at it today when I'm feeling a bit better. So we are going to look, as always, from Untapped GG, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates user win rate, including your own. Really cool tool. Link is in the video description if you want to get started. Let them know I sent you, and then I'll paste all these deck lists, timestamp them, and we'll get to go from there. So the popularity of the decks, as we always start, and as always mentioned, a popular deck doesn't mean necessarily a winning deck. It could be budget reasons, could just be fun to play, stuff of that nature. But looking at kind of the distribution, mono red is at just a shade under 17%. We have Selesnya Enchantments kind of jumping mono white this week at 9.6%. The mono white humans list is at 9.3%. Azorius Control 7.1%. And then we have just kind of the glut of like Esper Mid, Mono Black Aggro, the Domain decks, and then Gruul Dinosaurs. As a preface, I'm not going to cover Dinosaurs this week. The Dinosaurs lists are sub 50%, both the Naya and the Gruul version. So usually I keep it around a 55% win rate unless something interesting kind of pops up, but I'm not going to cover Gruul this week. In terms of Selesnya Enchantments, it's representing like a 10%. We actually see it kind of creep up here where, like, if we look maybe a week ago or 10 days ago-ish, mono white and mono red were pretty much on par, and we've just seen mono white kind of drop in terms of popularity. Mono red dropping a bit, but still holding pretty strong, and we've seen an increase in the Selesnya Enchantments deck. Selesnya Enchantment deck is literally card for card, like from week to week. At least with mono white, mono red, we get some deviations, and we'll kind of see from week to week. So I'll cover those, but if you want the Enchantments deck, literally just go on my Aether Hub where I link all the stuff. Type enchantments. It's the same deck that's been there for like the last 6 months, and you can kind of see like that there hasn't been any change to it, so I'm not going to cover it today. So we're going to go look at Diamond to Mythic rank, and from December 4th through the 11th, 52,000 games of best of one Magic were played during this time period, and while we've seen a drop in terms of the play rate, the win rate is held strong at 66% for mono white aggro. Now, the change from the week we saw was this one's a little bit more in tune to the older version of the deck. The other version of the deck that we are seeing, let me pull it up, it's still reasonable, all things considered. 66 to 58, but the big difference is this one's still playing the Spellbook vendors. It's got the Luminarch veterans, one hopeful initiate, recruitment officers, Skrulls, Thalias, kind of mixed with that. Whereas the version that we saw the last couple weeks that had surpassed it was this version here with the Warden of the Inner Skies, fewer Luminarch veterans, as well as Sanguine Evangelists. So a little bit heavier on the curve, a little bit less life gain. In part because if you're expecting a little bit more in terms of the aggressive decks, the Luminarch's not a terrible meta call, just incidentally gaining you some life, or with just heavy removal, it's another creature on the backside. Additionally, with heavy removal decks, just having Skrelv as a protection spell has some utility in that space. So I don't think either is necessarily a wrong choice. If you're interested in these archetypes, you can definitely try out both. We are seeing more matches being played with this particular variant, but the win rate just kind of correlates that this version is performing a little bit better right now on the ladder. So I can paste both these lists for folks as well. The next winningest deck is mono red, so highest percentage played, highest win rate, and 61.1%. And what we are seeing is kind of a flip and flop in terms of cards. We've seen Felden increase in numbers at times, decrease. I do hold the stance. I think Feldon is a better best of one card than best of three, dependent on the meta. We have been seeing more creature-based decks in best of three, and kind of the thing with Feldon, I always say, like in a red, green, blue, like things that are dealing damage, it's good. When you're playing a lot of white-based like exile effects or black-based removal, it kind of loses some of its value because its benefit comes from having to be blocked by your opponent. We're seeing a 3/3, like 3 of with Charming Scoundrel and the Bloodthirsty Adversary, and then 3/2 with Squee. We're seeing a copy of Shivan Devastator. The one thing I don't think I necessarily agree with is 3 Play with Fires. In best of one, it tends to be a little bit better suited to have the cheap removal with mono white being so popular. I think you want to be a little bit more proactive, or like not even proactive, like reactive but proactive at the same time, if that makes sense. Like Play with Fire provides you the utility that if you have to go face, if you have to scry, you can do it, but you can also answer like their turn 1, 2, 3 creatures in some cases. Monstrous Rages, Swift Spears. I do like the Stalker, Witch Stalker Frenzies in here. And we've seen at times they go upwards of 4 Mishra's Foundries and 2 Sokuzans, but this version's on 22 lands with the lower curve. I don't love Shivan Devastator in best of one, to be honest, either. This next one is a super fun deck. They're calling it Dimir Control. It's really a Dimir Midrange deck. It's at 59%. I have a best of 3 video with this, and this deck actually is really, really good against the domain ramp decks, just from like a tempo element side. So it's a schooner list, and this one's a little bit different in terms of numbers. First off, you should play at least 2 to 3 subterranean schooners. This card's really good, but it's like a Dimir tempo. You're using Invasion of Amonkhet to eat away at the hand. You can flip it, reanimate stuff. Deep Cavern Bat eats away at the hand. Fairy Mastermind, just like Flash Flex with Malcolm as well. You have some disruption with Make Disappear, Go for the Throat, cut downs in here. This version playing Disdainful Stroke main. I wouldn't play Disdainful Stroke main necessarily in best of one. It's going to be dead a lot of times. That's more of a best of 3 sideboard card. The Tishana was fine. The one thing, the Lord Skitter I wouldn't play in this deck in the end. So I found that, like, after playing the games, it kind of counteracts what you want to do with the Invasion of Amonkhet, because you don't necessarily want to eat away at their graveyard if you want to reanimate some of their stuff or like copy. It slows down your tempo element plays. I would either play like another Tishana for flash, or just like more interaction, just cheaper stuff, or even Graveyard Trespasser, just because it's a little bit harder to deal with and the life gain can be more relevant. The Gix was actually really good. Even maybe just play a second Gix with a lot of cheap flyers between Spyglass Siren and Deep Cavern Bat, and then Malcolm, even Fairy Mastermind. It's really easy to draw cards. The Kitesail Larcenist was pretty medium. I would probably just play actual removal. So I would do 2 of these, 2 Kaidos, and then like play around if you want the Tishanas. Urtai was really good. You play more Shieldred. The Tree Folk Thunderhawk, the thought is like you recur it, it becomes a copy, and then you kind of get that value with the tokens. This was oftentimes just a whatever card. The Alcatraz was pretty solid. There's a weird interaction with Invasion. If you have a copy Alcatraz, when it dies, it flips, and then it just flips back because it can't actually flip. It just comes as last step convert, and then you could just copy the Alcatraz again, which is kind of silly. But this was a really fun list. You have Restless Reefs, Myrex in the mana base. Check out the video. Like this, it's actually a really fun deck. It was probably one of the most fun I've had in Standard in a while. Going next, we go Azorius Control, 58.4%. And this is going to be your control deck of the format for the most part. You're seeing Ironcrag kind of ramp ahead with Celestis. Realmbreaker can be a win condition, just milling out your opponent, also just helping you ramp. Seeing a heavy focus on what I like about this list, it's considering best of one in mind. People sometimes port over their best of 3 lists. We see like the Disdainful Stroke in the main, which is not where you want to be when your opponent's on mono red aggro. But this version is like an Elspeth Smite, full Fateful Absence, full Get Lost, Sunset Revelry for the aggressive decks. I wouldn't even hate maybe shifting like an Absence to another Smite. But then your win conditions, like I said, you either mill them out, Jace mill them out, the Wandering Emperors for tokens, Sunfall for tokens, or you have the Restless Anchorage in your mana base as a creature to attack it as well. Go Boros Humans, 58.3%. and this is kind of a mashup of the mono white deck with some strong red cards. So Hopeful Initiate, Lunarch, Recruitment Officer, Warden's all in here. Coppercoat Vanguard buffs your human synergies. Get Lost as removal. Inti is really nice at just kind of churning through your deck, making your bigger things have trample, and then providing you some card advantage, kind of virtual card advantage. Ixalan here as a just way to go wide, and then you also have a Nim Pakal as another way to kind of go wide. So just a lot of your 3-drops just generating go wide tokens. Everything's human, so you have Cavern of Souls to help with the red cards as well as passive heroes, given that your 2 red cards are legendary. Deck we don't see too often this high in terms of win percentage is Mono Blue Tempo, 58.2. And the version here still is just on Tolarian Terror as well as Haughty Jin as the win conditions. I've seen some of them play 1 to 2 copies of Malcolm, just another flash threat in there that lets you kind of churn through your deck. But this deck's about countering spells, just kind of interacting with your opponent. We're seeing Afara's Dispersal, just being able to bounce creatures, just another way to kind of deal with something once it resolves. It's a cheap deck. And you're really just kind of interacting on the stack for the most part. Miraculous Swirling Whisk can protect your stuff or phase out your opponent's stuff, slip out the back as well, but counter, 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 bounce, counter, counter, bounce, draw some cards, Haughty Jin, kill them in like 2 turns type thing, or Tolarian Terror for 1 mana. You have the 4-color domain deck. This has largely been unchanged, but 58.2%. Ramp early between Briefcase, Topiary Stomper, the Invasions of Zendikar, and then just your top end is like Atraxas, Virtues. This is pretty much like Reed Duke's list from the it was Pro Tour or Tour Worlds, one of the 2. Win with Angel, win with Leyline, win with Atraxa. The one thing that we've seen more is these decks have shifted to play some number of Cavern of Souls in their mana base. Your Atraxas as well as your Archangel's Wrath, both being angels, allows them to be uncounterable. In best of 3, it's more relevant because you see a lot of the blue-based decks bring in Disdainful Strokes and stuff like that. And then we'll kind of go there. Next up, Esper Mid. This is a deck I think is better in best of 3 just because you do get access to like counter spells or more removal, whatever it may be, but leveraging a lot of good Esper cards at 55% win rate. Schooner's in here now. Cut downs, go for the throats, make disappears. So it's not Esper Legends per se, it's a little bit more interactive. Deep Cavern Bat's really good, just eating away at your opponent's hand, kind of throwing them off curve. Plays nicely with Rafine to make it bigger because you gain life. In this deck, I do like the Lord Skitter because you're making tokens, you have Virtue to kind of go wide. There's a lot of value between Wedding Announcement, Virtue, even Rafine just to dig deeper on your connives. All plays nicely with the Lord Skitter. Vertise, some Wandering Emperors, super rare heavy mana base. That's the opposite of a budget deck, but you have the card. Like I think this is one of the better decks in best of 3, but in best of 1, it's reasonable. It could definitely win games, but it is easy for some decks to kind of get under it or kind of screw up its draw. And lastly, Mono Black Aggro, 54% win rate, but I thought this one was kind of cool. You have the full set of Bloodletter of Alcatzotz. I can't even say that word, but just doubling the amount of life loss your opponent had. Cut downs, Bitter Triumphs, Evolve Sleepers, Tenacious Underdogs, Akiba in here. And then you have your 3-drop package of Trespassers, Lilianas, and Lord Skitters, some Arc Fiends, and then your top end, Gix Command, as well as Virtue. Interesting, no Shieldred in this list, opting to go a little bit more aggressive in terms of the flyers, and then just kind of beating down on your opponent. Mana base, I maybe have to play it, but I think 25 lands may be reasonable. Just given like some of your curve. This is effectively a 3-drop unless you flood, so maybe not, but Myrex and Mishra's Foundry, and then a whole bunch of basics. That's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking. We'll catch you next week, and happy Timeless for those joining in with me to have some fun in the new format. Thanks for watching.